Welcome to the America250PA Start Here, America Did podcast, telling the unique stories that make up the diverse fabric of Pennsylvania.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cassandra Coleman, the Executive Director of America250PA. Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast episode. Throughout this podcast series, we'll take you on a journey through Pennsylvania, uncovering its hidden treasures, rich heritage, and the remarkable individuals who shape its history, culture, and identity. So whether you're a Pennsylvania native, an enthusiast, or simply someone curious to learn more about the fascinating stories that make up the fabric of our great Commonwealth, we invite you to join us on this adventure. I would like to introduce Sydney Harris as the host of today's episode. We are so excited to have Sydney, who's a next-generation Pennsylvanian who's looking to connect with, learn more about, and explore our great Commonwealth. Let's get started with today's episode.
Thanks, Cassandra. My name is Sydney Harris, and I am your guest host for today's podcast. In this episode, we explore the best historic hotel in the country and the small town where it calls home. The Hotel Bethlehem is not just a place to stay, but a living museum echoing over 250 years of history. The town of Bethlehem itself is Pennsylvania's first national registered historic district. Bethlehem, PA found its name on Christmas Eve in 1741 as Moravian settlers sang a hymn with the line, "Not Jerusalem, lowly Bethlehem." They sang on their newly purchased land, the famous First House of Bethlehem. It's here, at this historic site, where the Hotel Bethlehem now proudly stands. I recently visited Hotel Bethlehem, where I was blown away by how beautiful and how timeless it was. There, I met Bruce Haines, the over 2-decade-long managing partner of the hotel. In this episode, we have the pleasure of hearing from Bruce about the history of the hotel and the town of Bethlehem itself. Bruce will take us on a historical tour of both the hotel and the town. He will discuss the hotel's designation as America's #1 best historic hotel by USA Today and share his goals as we look toward the hotel's future. Bruce, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Your article on heritage tourism in historic Bethlehem, Pennsylvania has garnered a lot of interest. Could you share with our listeners a brief history of Bethlehem and what makes it a unique destination for heritage tourism?
Sure thing, Sydney. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Obviously, I have a great deal of passion for Bethlehem, and it's really unique cultural history that started here in the mid-1700s with the Moravians. The Moravians came from originally the Czech Republic. It's a Protestant religion. It's actually the oldest Protestant religion. And they actually preceded the Lutherans, but they were persecuted and went to Germany. And then in the mid-1700s, they went all over the world to become missionaries. And in 1741, came here to America. They actually started down in Georgia and somehow ended up here in Pennsylvania in our sylvan woodlands, if you will. And they were very, very industrious. And their job was really to be missionaries to the Native Americans. And so they found a place here along the Lehigh River and put their stake in the ground and built the first house in 1741, which was actually on the site of what is currently where the hotel is, so the Hotel Bethlehem. So the hotel effectively goes back to hosting guests here since 1741, but the original house was here, and then they built a town settlement that was a model they used wherever they went in the world. So the Moravians were really known for building communities with town squares. And they had an interesting setup where they all worked for the good of the community. The single men lived in one home, then the single women lived in another. Then when they married, which was by a lot system, interesting, they would then move into the married quarters in the Bell House. They produced all their goods right near the original first house. And basically, this was the first industrial park in the American colonies. They were extremely industrious. So the men worked, and the men were the missionaries, and the women worked in the Gemein House, which was the community center, if you will, where the first church was, and then they had the school there for the children. And the Moravians were the first people in the American colonies to educate women. They understood that women needed to be educated if they're going to be educating the children. So Moravian College, which is now Moravian University, is really the sixth oldest college in America and the first to educate women in the American colonies. So there's great roots here of a community that was self-contained, and really you had to be a Moravian to live here for the first 100 years in Bethlehem.
Wow, that is so interesting. And, when we talk about heritage tourism, can you go a little bit into why you believe that people should come and visit Bethlehem?
It's a hidden secret, clearly, in terms of colonial history. The people that lived here in Bethlehem 50 years ago in the 60s and 70s understood the real value of these buildings. And even the Department of Interior has recognized that, considered one of the finest examples of Germanic architecture in America. And so what we have here is preserved history. And the people in the 60s and 70s figured that out. And our forefathers actually, in order to make sure it stayed that way, they were designated as the first National Historic District in the state. So because of that, what we have here is truly authentic, preserved colonial history. And I think you combine that with the fact in 2015, we have a unique Main Street with 25 boutique shops, 25 boutique restaurants, and 25 historic buildings to see. So this is a destination deemed and named a top 10 Main Street in the USA in 2015. And then, of course, the hotel in 2019 got nominated for one of the best historic hotels. And since then, we've been number 3, number 2, and then the last 3 years in a row, we've been number 1. So historic Bethlehem offers an incredible experience, an authentic experience. And besides here, just right across the river, was the beginning of the industrial age of America, and the beginning of iron making. And the center of iron making began here with Bethlehem Steel. And that was preserved. And at that same time, Asa Packer, a railroader during the industrial era, founded Lehigh University to educate and develop leaders for the new industrial America that was about to occur. So we have a lot to experience, and it's all authentic, which is the part that I really personally think is special.
When I visited, you can see that the people of Bethlehem love their town, cherish their community, and want to express their history. I understand that the Moravian church settlement adjacent to the hotel has been nominated for a World Heritage Designation. What does this mean? Can you discuss why this nomination is so important?
It authenticates for sure the authenticity, if you will, of this colonial settlement, because a World Heritage Site has to be considered to be universally culturally significant. And we only have about 25 World Heritage Sites in the United States. And if you were to take a tour to Europe, tour the Rhine, for example, the quality of the tour is measured by how many World Heritage Sites you're going to visit during your tour. So I think to be nominated, which is where we are right now, we were the U.S. nominee for 2023. Each year, each country can nominate one site. Our Moravian Church Settlement site, adjacent and behind the hotel, was named among 3 World Heritage Sites, 3 Moravian Church settlements that were all nominated. And it's a multi-country nomination, which makes it really significant. So the original mothership, if you will, of the Moravians in Germany and Herrenhut, they also are part of this nomination, as is a site in the UK, in Northern Ireland. And those 3 would join the Moravian settlement that was named a World Heritage Site in Denmark in 2015. So when that site was named in 2015, it was with the intention that there would be more multi-country Moravian Church settlement sites named. So this year, we are blessed to be among the 3 sites the Department of Interior put forth for this designation, which is really special. Now, what makes it really special is there's only 5 sites on the East Coast that are World Heritage Cultural Sites. There's only 2 in Pennsylvania. One is Independence Hall. Recently, Falling Water out near Pittsburgh was named as a Frank Lloyd Wright designation with some of his other buildings, including the Guggenheim Museum in New York. the Statue of Liberty in New York. And then the only other site on the East Coast is Monticello at the University of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson Estate. So that's the kind of company that we would be in if we are so blessed to be anointed. Hopefully that could happen as early as next summer.
Wow, that's incredible. And, you know, all of the names that you just discussed, like Independence Hall and Falling Water, they're all known names. And I think what makes Bethlehem and the hotel so important is that they're really hidden treasures. And it's something that is so important to the structure of Pennsylvania, but isn't always recognized. And with a World Heritage Designation, it can boost this recognition. And that's what we're really trying to do here today as well, is get people to know and learn about this wonderful site that you've been a part of for over 20 years. I want to dive a little bit deeper into the history of the hotel. The Hotel Bethlehem has been recognized as America's #1 best historic hotel for 3 straight years by USA Today. Could you dive into the rich history of the hotel itself and what you believe sets it apart from other historic hotels?
When the hotel was built in 1921 and opened in 1922, before it on this site was the First House hosting people. And then the Moravians built a hotel in 1823 here that they owned for at least half of its life. And then they tore that down right after World War I. And Charles Schwab, the chairman of Bethlehem Steel, wanted a grand and glorious hotel for his customers and his suppliers and people that came to visit his steel plant. The reason for that was U.S. Steel, which was in Pittsburgh, and his major competitor, the William Penn Hotel, had just been built in Pittsburgh, which is a great, great hotel. And so the customers going to visit U.S. Steel, stayed in this beautiful new hotel, William Penn. And so we had here the old Eagle Wooden Hotel. So he wanted a grand and glorious hotel. But in addition to that, the other thing that was happening at that time in the 1920s is Henry Ford had finally made the automobile affordable for the average American. And so automotive tourism exploded around 1920. And as a result of that, it was the explosion of automotive tourism that drove the construction of hundreds of hotels like the Hotel Bethlehem in each of the towns along the way, as each town attempted to capture these tourists driving through their town to stay overnight and shop in their businesses. So the Chamber of Commerce of Bethlehem was instrumental in building this hotel with the encouragement of Charles Schwab. But it was built to capture people coming through town in the tourism industry, and also to be the center of the community. So this was pretty typical in the 20s. So a lot of communities did this. But in the case of Bethlehem, this hotel was financed by volunteers from the Chamber of Commerce, knocking door to door on the homes and saying, would you like to be an owner of the Hotel Bethlehem? And for $50, you could own a share of your community hotel. So the Hotel Bethlehem was built 9 stories tall, and every other building in town was only 4 stories tall, because until Bethlehem Steel invented the rolled I-beam, buildings collapsed if they were more than 4 stories. So it was right about the time of the Bethlehem Steel I-beam, and the objective was that it would stand out as people were driving through town. And what really hurt all of these hotels was in the 50s when they built the interstate highway system, and all these downtown hotels started folding one by one and became apartments, or they became offices, or they were torn down over time. And the Hotel Bethlehem was, at risk of that as well. But Bethlehem Steel, because this was so important to Bethlehem Steel, they jumped in to acquire the shares and buy the hotel and save the hotel in the 1960s. And then in the 80s, they sold the hotel to a private party that owned it for 15 years. And then Bethlehem Steel closed its plant in 1996, and the Hotel Bethlehem closed and was boarded up and bankrupt and closed. And it was a sad day in Bethlehem in 1998. That's when I entered the scene to save the hotel as a hotel. The Moravians, they had an interesting idea. 3 of the guest floors were going to be senior citizen apartments, and the other 3 were going to be girls' dorms for Moravian College, which is right next door, as you know. So at that point, I stepped in to save it as a hotel and put a group together of 13 of us to buy the hotel, restore it, and bring it back to its original roots. And 25 years later, here we are, #1 best historic hotel. Very proud of that and proud of the support of our community, quite frankly. I mean, we are still a community hotel. And if you come into the hotel, we not only have the guests from all over the world, they'll be mingling over breakfast or at the bar with locals that come in here regularly. So, over half of our business is the locals coming into the hotel and just being a part of it and having their weddings and events here. So it's been a fun ride.
When you first walk into the hotel and to your right is your wonderful restaurant, you'll see on the walls of that restaurant all of your past guests. And this is something that really stuck with me because I would look at the wall and I'd be like, oh, he was here or she was here. Could you give a list of some of the people who have been to Hotel Bethlehem?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, we don't put every guest up on the wall, but we do consider that our hall of history, our dine among our former famous guests. And when you enter, we have on the right, we have a Republican column, and on the left, we have a Democratic column. So we're bipartisan here. We've had 2 U.S. presidents, two Republicans, Dwight Eisenhower and Gerald Ford, and then 2 Democrats, JFK and Bill Clinton, who have stayed here. So that starts it. But then you go back to Charles Schwab with Bethlehem Steel and his interaction with his industrial giant friends, Henry Ford. Thomas Edison was here, who was a good friend of Henry Ford's. And among my favorite is Amelia Earhart was here. She was here visiting a friend of hers whose daughter was going to school at the Moravian Girls Academy. We've had the Dalai Lama when he was speaking at Lehigh. We also have had 2 prime ministers. Winston Churchill was here. And more recently, Theresa May, who spoke at Lehigh.
So the hotel itself is historic, but there's also been history walking through its halls with the guests and the people who've been there. So now I want to move into your personal contribution to the hotel. You've been there for over 2 decades as the managing partner of the historic hotel. You've undoubtedly played a pivotal role in its success. Could you share with us some key initiatives or changes you've implemented that you feel have been instrumental in this success?
It sort of started with the decision to buy the hotel and put together the group of investors. I was working for U.S. Steel at the time in Pittsburgh, but I'm a Lehigh graduate. So my wife and I stayed here at this hotel all the time, coming back here to Lehigh events, and my family, I grew up in New Jersey. So when the hotel closed, it was like losing our second home. We put together a group of people, mostly Lehigh grads, teamed up with hoteliers, and we got the thing reopened. And the significant part that started when you say, what did we do significantly, that it was really restoring it and opening the hotel back up to really look like it did when it was built in 1922. The next thing that I think was to affiliate with Historic Hotels of America. This is a part of the branch of the National Trust. It contains a group of hotels who are the famous hotels of the U.S., from the Plaza in New York to the Colonial Williamsburg Inn to the Hershey Hotel to other really great hotels, the Homestead, the Greenbrier. We became affiliated with some really great hotels. We even changed the name of the hotel from Hotel Bethlehem to Historic Hotel Bethlehem. Locally, we still call ourselves Hotel Bethlehem, but nationally and internationally, we're the Historic Hotel Bethlehem. So that branding, I think, was, if you ask, what were the significant things, I think that was probably the most significant thing we did. And then a little bit later, probably the most significant thing from Pennsylvania's point of view is that my wife had the idea of serving Penn State Creamery ice cream here. So we did that one weekend, and it was a smashing success. And so we opened our ice cream parlor across the street. It tied together our history with Penn State's history, the oldest college creamery in the country. And so that was a big success and continues to be a big success. And then the next thing we did is open an executive conference center up the street for a little off-site experience for people that come from out of town. And then the last thing is we're about to open an extended stay suites above the ice cream parlor. So that's the next exciting step. So there's been a series of probably a half dozen things that I would say have enhanced and made it fun with these changes periodically that, just continue to grow the property.
Looking towards the future, what vision do you hold for the hotel? And are there specific goals or milestones you're aiming to achieve in the coming years?
I'm 79 years old, so I have to be a realist here. The 25 years of one owner entity here, it's reasonable at that point in time to be looking for the future steward that's going to carry on the legacy. And that's going to take some time. That's not a quick process. And especially with the passion that my wife and I have for this hotel and the owners in general, my partners, this is sort of like going out and trying to find the right person to marry my daughter. You're not just looking for anybody here. And we'll probably kiss a lot of frogs to find the right prince. But, I'm sure at some point, whether it's a historic hotel person that owns another historic hotel somewhere in the U.S. that understands what this is all about, or whether it's a local person that really understands Bethlehem and the role of the hotel in the future of Bethlehem, I'm sure we will find the right steward at some point.
Right. You're looking for somebody who cares as much about the heritage and history of the hotel as you do. And, they may come from the Bethlehem community. They might come from outside, acknowledging how wonderful the community is. So thank you, Bruce, so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure, Sydney. I really appreciate it. It was very nice meeting you here.
Today, we've traveled through time, exploring the rich tapestry of history that makes the Hotel Bethlehem not just a place to stay, but a living, breathing piece of Pennsylvanian heritage. From the famous First House of Bethlehem in the 18th century to its current status as America's #1 best historic hotel as recognized by USA Today, we've seen how the Hotel Bethlehem has become an integral part of the Bethlehem community and a beacon of heritage tourism. Whether you're new to Bethlehem's charm or a returning admirer of the hotel in town, I hope today's episode has sparked a deeper appreciation for this Pennsylvania treasure. That brings us to the end of today's epic episode. Tune in next time for an exciting conversation on how Pennsylvania does not drop the ball on New Year's. Until then, this is Sydney Harris, thanking you for your company on this historical journey and wishing you a journey full of history and discovery wherever you go. Stay tuned for our next episode, and remember to stay PA proud.
We hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Here at America250 PA, we are striving to make 2026 epic as we educate, preserve, innovate, and celebrate everything Pennsylvania has to offer. Do you have an epic idea for a podcast story? Go to America250PA.org to submit your idea. Thanks again for joining us.
This has been the America250 PA Start Here, America Did podcast, produced by Commonwealth Media Services. Stay tuned for more epic Pennsylvania stories at America250PA.org.